Welcome once again to the J Lowe Artist YouTube channel. Thanks for joining me on this artistic adventure. Today we'll be working with ink, pen and ink. So have your kneaded eraser, a number 2 or an HB pencil handy, and any type of ink that you would like to use. But make sure that it's archival, that it's permanent, that it's black, and a smooth ink. And let's start doing some ink drawing. And thanks for being willing to draw along with me. I know it's not easy. And ink drawing is one of those things that just takes a lot of practice. So the first thing you want to do is simple shapes. Simple shape for me is this kind of rectangle shape. I can just kind of this little rectangle shape out here. And here's part of that little tower area. There's a little triangle that's up on top there. Remember, everything gets erased. So anything you draw with this pencil is going to get erased. So just start out simple shapes. Triangles, rectangles. It doesn't have to be perfect. Leave yourself plenty of room at the bottom for the moat, this little river that's running through there, or stream that runs through there. Most moats, and you might not know this, most moats in the Middle Ages were dry. There's no water in them. There are only a few that had water in them. And when you're doing trees, like if you're going to outline the trees, just kind of delineate them like you would a cloud. Little flowers there on the walls. Those will be fun. There's a little lamp just off to the left. There is this little lamp. I'm going to put that little lamp in there because it's kind of charming. If you want to delineate where things are, like that little archway, there used to be a window there or a little doorway. They sealed it up. You can put that in there. And I'm going to leave out the gutter. It's that downspout you see right in the middle of those. I'm just going to leave that out. Just because it's not charming. This cute little weather vane on top of that. You may want to put that in there just as a little line or maybe a little cross. Don't get too wrapped up with like trees and things like that. Just show where they are and just forget it, because we're going to use our pen to get all that texture. There's another little house back in there, the kind of white with the window, and a little sign that's back in that area. I'm going to leave that out. It's distracting. But I like the little flowers. I think we'll put the flowers in. Maybe some of these little trees. These on the side, these trees over here, they're kind of nice. Okay, like I say, everything that's here is going to get erased. So don't get too attached onto that stuff. When you've got your simple shapes in, your basic composition, where you want everything to go. Now, this isn't perfect. We're going to have to adjust it. We're going to have to change it a little bit here and there. That's just the way it is. Okay, so I'm going to start out with this little weather vane that's up there. I'm just going to do this little oval. Anytime you have light on the top, you can kind of start out with a little oval or a little circle. You can put some little dots and dashes in the bottom area, but then that top part comes straight off of it. You don't even have to attach it. You just leave it there hanging out. Here's a little design there. I have no idea what's going on there. Little shape of this and that. There's a couple little dots and dashes. And that's it. Then as I come down, there's a little metal piece that it sits on, a little bronze or copper piece that it sits on. And again, I'm just using little dots and dashes. And then the roof line. The roof line is fairly dark on both sides. You could, if you wanted to, do kind of a line, but I'm a little unfamiliar with that, so I'm going to just do a couple little dots and dashes on both sides, and I'm going to try, as I go, try to make those even. The cool thing is they're not quite even. That's okay. I can adjust them because our roof's going to have texture to it. A dot here or there is just not going to make that big of a difference. And so sometimes if I'm just not quite sure what I want to do, I'll just add some dots in there. Here's that little section. There's some dots there. Because you can adjust it. You can make it a little bit wider. And then also, there's little edges in there. I may want to throw those in with just a couple little dots and dashes. Just to say, that's where that edge of that center spine goes. Maybe this one comes out over here. That can also come down a little bit to the edge. And then there's under the eaves of that roof. It looks like somebody just kind of stuck it on top there. But there's a little edge there. You can throw that in with a very thin little line. It's going to get darker because it does look darker. Connects onto that other edge. And you can use little dots to just say, this is where I think it should go. If you don't have a ruler, you can use little dots and then line them up. Visually line them up. So just little dots and dashes. Then you think, okay, that's pretty close to where I want it to go. So now I'm going to use little crossed lines. Now the little tiles on the roof there, you can barely see them as little lines. So I'm going to use that to my advantage. I'm just going to come through and just ever so lightly put these little lines in. And because the roof slants that way, that's the way I'm going to put my line. Just contour them this way. And if it's dark, you're going to have more line. They'll be closer together. Now, I'm going to adjust my roof here. I think, that needs to go a little steeper. So I'm going to adjust my roof just a little bit. If I had drawn a line right there, I couldn't adjust it. Because if I did, everybody would go, oh, there's a funny line there. But with dots and dashes, I mean, you have dots and dashes anyway. So just use those. That's a better edge, in my opinion. Now I'm going to use just a little parallel line, and it's going to look kind of like tile. And the least line you use, the lighter the value. So this is fairly dark on this side. I can come back into it and use more line. So I can go in between the lines that I just drew. And then as it comes up, this is a little lighter. So I'm going to use less line in there. I'm going to start from that edge. This is my subliminal edge right there. I'm going to start from there and work over. I don't need much, just a few here and there, just to tell your viewer this is a texture. It's a roof. It's tiles. And really, you don't need too much more than that. However, sometimes as you're drawing along, you think that's enough, and then you draw some more around it, and all of a sudden it's like, no, that wasn't enough. You can always add more. So I'm just going to go into this, do the same thing with this side. It's a little darker, so my lines are going to be closer together. But also, that edge is not super smooth. I mean, those tiles, if you get up close to it, those little tiles have texture to them. So nothing wrong with having a little texture on the side there. And then this section here, it's slightly darker than the other one. And so I'm going to do the same thing, but a little closer line. Not as close as the other side, but a little closer. And again, I can always go back in and add more. I'm barely touching the papers. Sometimes my pen just kind of skips across the surface and doesn't make a full line. And that's okay. That's part of that texture. And you may say, oh, you know what, Mr. Lowe, I think it's a little darker. I think it needs more. Go ahead, add some more. I'm just trying to go in between the lines I've already got. That'll darken those up a little bit. This roof, same thing, except it's quite dark. It's as dark as this edge. They're probably on the same plane. And so it's going to need some more. So I'm just going to go straight down in the same direction that the roof's going, back and forth. This edge looks a little darker to me, so I'm going to add just a little line. You can use little dots. You can crosshatch, whatever you need. It just feels like it needs to go a little darker. There's a little spire coming up on the other side. I think I'm going to leave that out. This little thing right here, there's a little spire that's coming up right there. I'm going to leave it out just because it's confusing if you don't know what it is. Probably from another little church or something that's on the other side. Trying a different angle just to see if I can get maybe a little different feel of that. And you just keep going until you're happy with it. Underneath that roof is that really dark edge. And you just throw that in with little hatched lines like this. Just kind of scribbly hatched lines. I know I'm going to come back in. I'm going to have to cross hatch it. So I'm going to come back in it like this, and then I'll cross hatch. So once I go one way, then I'm going to come back in the other way and cross hatch. And you could, if you wanted to, even go back into it again. Now, right here, as you come down this, there's an edge there, but it's really light, and there's no dark edge, there's no shadow there. So what I'm going to do, and if you're a little timid like me, I'm just going to very lightly put a pencil line down there and just say that's the edge of my building. I don't want an ink line there, but I do want the brick to show where that edge is. You can do that on the other side too, where that comes down. You can say, well, there's a little line there, and throw that in. We're going to delineate, we're going to just do the brick and let the brick take care of itself over there. So what I'm going to do is little meandering lines that go back and forth like this. But because the brick is a little darker and the mortar in between is lighter, I'm just going to take and just do some little hatched lines like this. Here and there. This is going to end up looking like brick with mortar in between. I'm going to start where that edge is, not going to draw a line down the edge. Just kind of start there and just do these little hatched lines in between. And we don't have to do that all over. We don't have to do it everywhere. Just where it's darker. Because like halfway down through there, there's some really light area down in there. I'm just going to leave that out. The other thing you can do is little meandering lines. And I'll show you what that is. That's kind of like going back and forth, doing like little arches or little circles like this. And you just barely touch it. And therefore, you get this kind of pebbly brick look. If you're going to do brick, you'd be more rectangular with them. And again, you don't need it everywhere, just here and there. Just enough to tell your viewer that's what it is. I'm going to throw in that little archway. Just going to do a little zigzaggy shape. And that's all I'm going to do to it. The other part of the archway, you can't even see it. So why draw it? And then do some of these little meandering kind of lines here and there. Like I say, you don't need them everywhere. Just enough. As rock sticks out from the side of the building, the bottom edge is going to be a little darker. Usually that's where you get moss or little mineral deposits or things. And you get shadow under there. It's usually just kind of the bottom edge. And luckily our little stones are not all the same size, and so and if in your picture it looks lighter, just don't draw them in. Just leave them out. When in doubt, leave them out. Little dots and dashes, and you got it. Is that the easiest brick you've ever drawn? Where this edge is, I'm just going to stop at that edge, stop drawing there, and that'll make an edge there. So my edge here, my edge there will come through with just my little textures. Right in the middle, it's kind of lighter, so I'm just going to do just a little bit less. As I get down to where the wall is, and I know there's little flowers there, I'm just going to leave that out because I'm going to do some little flowers. Or if you think to yourself, well, I need to show where that wall is, you can do these little little fan-shaped kinds of little grass type things, and you can add flowers to them later. Just to say this is where the wall goes, and there's flowers on top of the wall. There's little plants up there. There's probably enough rock in there. Again, you can always do more if you feel like you need to. Right here in the middle, there's this little edge where that downspout goes. I know it's hard to see, but I just know it's there. So I'm just going to throw that in using little lines back and forth and just say, well, there's a little shadow right there down that edge. Anytime you do windows are just like little sevens or backward sevens. Usually the top part is a little darker because light's coming from above. Not always, but sometimes. So I'm just going to do this little 7. And then because it's darker on the inside, I'm just going to do some little hatches through it. Hatch, 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 hatch. And that's your window. If there was glass in it, you may not hatch that much. And around that is some rock. So you may want to just say, well, there's rock up around it. Here's some more little light stuff. If there's large, chunky rocks like there is, and they're darker, you may want to just go hatch through it. Just go, okay, it's a little darker. Or you may just say, just going to leave it out. When in doubt, leave it out. You can always come back in later if you need to. Sometimes you're amazed what a little dot will do. Another little window in the middle of this section, and it goes the other way. Sometimes this is as much of a feel as it is knowing how to do it. You just kind of go, it feels like I should do that. If you question that, try a piece of tracing paper. Put a little tracing paper on it, see if that helps. Here's my flowers. They're just little dots and dashes. You don't have to make all the petals. Remember, if you want something to look light and soft, you leave it out. So I'm just going to do little dots and dashes that represent the bottom edges of the flowers. And the top part you just leave out. Like I say, just don't be afraid to leave things out. When you're drawing grass or things like that, if you go in kind of a fan shape, like I start out here and I kind of go this way and fan it out, tends to look better because grass grows that way out from clumps. Flowers grow that way. Here's my lamp post. It's lighter on the one side. You don't even have to connect everything. And a little lamp post. Now, anything that is farther away from you, because of atmosphere, because it's in the distance, less line. Use less line. So this other little building, I can see where it is, but I'm just going to scribble it in. And I'm going to use less line, less detail. I know it's going to look like I did a lot of detail, but I really didn't. Little shapes, light and dark. No edges. And that's really about it. Because it's at a distance, just let it go. A couple little lines here and there. You should have less line at things at a distance. So this little tree that just back in there, trees are pretty easy to do. There's a lot that you leave out. Look at the shadows of the tree and just do the shadows. Don't do the light areas. Just do the shadow areas and leave the light areas out. I'm using like little M's and N's, little curly Q kinds of things. If there's a little light area, you just leave it out. Just do the shadowy areas. So this is part of that tree. And the more I do on it, the better it's going to look. M's and U's. You don't even worry about branches. They don't even have to attach. Here's some little limbs just hanging out there. They're not even attached to anything. They're just hanging out. Trees are really easy to do. And if it's, too big or too small, nobody cares because trees grow that way. Just doing the darkest areas. Little M's. I don't know how else to say that. And I'm just doing little bumpies on the top. And if you do a bottom limb, they're like little U shapes. I'm going to do this rock wall down here. And it's done the same way, but you can see how textural that is. So there's a lot of that maybe that you want to leave out. Just going to go in and just back and forth. I'm looking at see where the darkest stones are. Trying to pick those out with those little shapes. Here's my flowers. Like I say, you can just put little dots here and there, and that's probably enough. That's all you need. Everybody knows what it is. Last thing we're going to do is the little river, and it's pretty easy to do. These are just little meandering kinds of back and forth, just barely touching the surface. Add a couple little dots in between. You got it. Little trees are going to take you forever, but that's okay. It's very therapeutic to draw trees. I don't know if it's because it's Mother Nature or if it's just those little tiny repeated strokes and the fact that you're leaving things out. It makes it fun. So I'm just using little back and forth kinds of little strokes, little almost circular shapes too. You can do little circular shapes. Try to keep it varied. Use a little line, little dot, whatever you need. There's some trees in the background, just little dots and dashes, and everybody gets that idea. Oh, those are trees. When you're ready to do the water, rivers, streams, things like that, they all kind of just remember everything is very level. If it's a hard flowing water, you're not going to have as much reflections in there. So you just go around the edge, like where the darkest areas are, and you just do these little back and forth lines. Like this, back and forth. And if it's a fairly deep river, you can do little meandering back and forth like this. But you don't want to do too much, just a little. And remember to keep them very horizontal. Your line should never come straight down. You shouldn't have a lot of curves. If you have a curve, it's more of a very light, thin curve. Everything should be very horizontal. And that is the easiest water you will ever draw. Now you have every technique you need to finish this. Dots, dashes, little trees, or just look at the shadow areas. Do the little shadow areas and leave out the light. So now that most of my information is in there, I'm going to get rid of all my graphite. That'll clean it up, take out any of the smudgies. It's my favorite part, getting rid of the graphite. With ink, you can vignette it. In other words, you've got your subject matter, and as you work your way out away from it, you just less and less line, and just let it kind of fade out. That gives it a nice texture. I think that's a good place for a signature right there. Hopefully you had a fun experience today and learned something maybe, and even tried something that you've never done before. And hopefully somewhere along the way it's made your life a little bit better, because art makes life better. I hope you have a lovely day.